Welcome back to First Look, where we give you a sneak peek at an upcoming game that you might not have heard of. And today we're looking at Hegemony. This is a game by Varnavas Timotheo and Vangelis Vayatakis. It's a 2 to 4 player asymmetric politico-economic simulation, all driven by card play and Euro mechanisms. Now, don't let that frighten you, because as weighty as that might sound, it's presented in a way that's not only visually appealing, but also more digestible than you might first think. Now, with that said, this is a first look. It's not a full preview or a how to play. So today, I'm going to give you just a brief tour of the main board, highlight some of the differences between how the 4-player roles work, and give you a general sense, mechanically, for what happens on a player's turn. Before we do take a closer look at the main board, it's going to be very important for you to know who's sitting around it. In a 2-player game, it'll be the capitalist class and the working class. As you might expect, the capitalist class is motivated by amassing wealth, by converting revenue over to capital. It's a primary source for their victory points and will involve building companies, producing and selling goods and services, and navigating all the political policy and economic interrelationships that dynamically change within the system of this game. The working class is just looking for prosperity for their population, which is gained through the consumption of goods and services. Their population is derived from the number of workers they have in play, many of which working for and being paid by the very companies built by the other classes. In fact, they can even form trade unions once they have enough control over the labor force of a particular type of company. And of course, they too have to do all of this while navigating all of the political policies and economic interrelationships that are being constantly manipulated in the game. In a 3-player game, the middle class is added. They're a bit of a blend between the first two. They produce goods and services just on a smaller scale than the capitalists. Like the working class, though, they're focused on prosperity, but also a little bit on savings. They also have workers and opportunities to own and operate their own companies in the private sector. And speaking of that, let's jump over to the main board and take a look at the private sector, because I think this area is what most directly ties those 3 classes together. The private sector has 12 spaces for capitalist companies and 8 spots for middle-class companies. Some of these are seated during setup, but others may be built throughout the game. And as they are, the available workforce will be employed. Each company produces some amount of one of the 4 standard goods and services: food, luxury, health, and education. They may require a mix of skilled and unskilled workers and have an adjustable wage scale. So as you might start to see, the capitalists and the middle class build companies to produce goods and services. The middle class and working class will work at those companies in order to earn income to buy and consume those goods and services. And just as it is in the real world, those dynamics are just the basis for how all of those classes get along and work together. If only there were an entity to help them get along and work together. Enter the state. At full player count, the 4th player takes on the role of the state, which is motivated by its legitimacy across all the classes. It'll manage a wide range of things in the game to make sure that its legitimacy is as balanced as possible, as it will score only the lowest 2 during each scoring round. And aside from the state's player board, there are a number of areas on the right side of the main board that relate directly to them as well. They'll have to decide if and how they want to deal with local and national events each round, tipping the scales for one class or another, or suffering penalties for ignoring them. There are spots for state benefits for each class if they choose to take them. The state treasury is where all of their funds are kept, and public services is their inventory of health, education, and media influence. And of course, the public sector, where you'll find all of the state-run companies. Depending on fiscal policy, there may be 3, 6, or 9 companies face up. Now, as I've introduced the 4-player roles and highlighted some of the areas on the board, I'm sure this has just raised more questions for you. And while I can't cover every little detail in this video, I do want to spend some time explaining in a general sense what you're going to be doing on your turn. Each player has a deck of action cards specific to their role, with a hand of 8 at the beginning of each action phase. The action phase is just one of 5 phases in each round, but as the name implies, it's where most of the action takes place. When it's your turn, you will play one card from your hand for its effect, or as a discard in order to take one of your basic actions. There are a range of action cards, and many of them are unique to each deck. For example, the working class might get a break on healthcare benefits. The middle class can find synergies by building storage and a company that work well together. The capitalist class might increase wages at one of their companies to lure workers over from the public sector. And the state could proactively tackle unemployment with a targeted program. The potential impact of action cards is wide-ranging, and you'll notice that many have a policy restriction that serves as a prerequisite for playing the card for its effect. And that brings us to this section right here in the upper left-hand corner of the board. This is where players are going to track the position of 7 different political policies. There's fiscal policy, the labor market, taxation, healthcare and benefits, education, foreign trade, and immigration. Each of these has 3 different positions, which all have a significant impact on the game and its systems. For example, the labor market has a direct impact on the lowest acceptable wage paid out by the companies. Immigration will affect how many new potential workers are introduced into the system at the beginning of each round. And like I said, many of your action cards are only playable for their effect if certain policies are in certain positions. So for example, if the working class wanted to boost domestic tourism, the fiscal policy would have to be in position A or B. But how do you adjust or change policies? Well, you propose a bill, and that's just one of the many basic actions at your disposal when you play an action card as a discard, ignoring its effect. And that's just the first step towards changing policy, which ultimately requires a vote. Proposing a bill is a basic action that everybody has, but there are many that are incredibly unique to each role. The working class can strike or hold a demonstration. The middle class can pull an extra shift for a little more production out of one of their companies. The capitalists can make business deals or lobby for influence, and the state can deal with an event, charge extra tax, or meet directly with the leaders of a class. And again, these are just some of the unique aspects between the different player roles. They play differently, they score differently, and they all rely on each other in some way, shape, or form. And I have to stress again, I've only given you a glimpse from like 30,000 feet of what's going on in this game. I didn't even touch on the imports and exports, your free actions, the production phase, elections phase, and all of the different ways to score more points. Hegemony tackles the ambitious goal of trying to make a weighty subject and simulation into a card-driven Eurogame that's fun to play. I have to admit, I had fun just learning the game and trying to understand how all the different things work together. I'm really looking forward to getting this back to the table and playing it a few times at a full player count. Be sure to check out their campaign for more information, but if you have any questions at all, feel free to make them in the comments below. I will hopefully enlist their help and give you the answers you're looking for. Until then though, make sure everyone has fun at the table, and we'll see you then. Congratulations, you got to the end of one of our videos. Now, if you want more practice, just click on the video over here. It's another video. You might not have seen it yet, so click on it. If you don't want to do that, at least click on the subscription button below. That always helps us. And if you want notifications, please ring that bell.